Blood is balancing the phone again, but I'll go ahead and start on the questions. It seems like this is going to be a hilarious, unpredictable live event, and I think you just got a glimpse of the other corner of my house as the camera tumbled, but which is kind of messy right now. But anyway, so I have so many of these questions that I decided to kind of divide them up into categories, and I don't have any particular order that I'm going to go through them. I'll just go from one category to the next and go through a couple from each and then go to the next to give us a sort of variety and mix of things as we go. So the first couple of questions I thought I'd start with somebody by the name of Vandam. That's the screen name. Says, please let us know how you, me, as a former rock hater, experience the rock part of Stairway to Heaven. Do you like the sound of those thundering drums? Can you appreciate the rock guitar solo better now? Do the whole rock aesthetics make more sense to you now? And so my answer to that is, well, there's a lot in there to unpack, but yes, I do appreciate the sound of those thundering drums. I guess I wouldn't classify myself as a rock hater. I would classify myself as a rock ignoramus. But I do enjoy powerful sounds. And that's something that I'll get back to with some of the other questions down the line here. Because even in my classical world, we have some pretty big sounds which we enjoy. And so, yes, I did enjoy those thundering drums. Can I appreciate the rock guitar solo better now? I'm getting there. Some of them that I've heard were more, I guess I could say, meaningful to me than others. I can't say that the guitar solo is something that I'm just sitting on the edge of my seat waiting for yet, but I begin to feel the place it belongs in and to appreciate what it is in the larger context of the music. So I'm on my way. Do the whole rock aesthetics make more sense to you now? I don't know. Some yes, some no. A lot depends on what. Stairway to Heaven was really an easy listen to me. I mean, it was beautiful, it made sense, it was something that I could get into. I still have to admit that the Metallica piece that I listened to, I haven't listened to since I did that whole process because I just needed a break from it, and I'll get back to that sort of heavy sound and maybe I'll be able to relate to it better. But that's where I am right now. The next question comes from Doug Fensky, and he said, it seems to me that the Scottish snap effect you described is similar to syncopation. Is syncopation different, or perhaps a good way to describe what you described? Well, okay, so there's a technical word in there, syncopation, which some of you might know and some of you might not. It's an interesting question to me though, because in a way, it can sort of resemble syncopation, but the definition I think of syncopation is that syncopation interrupts or sets into a different balance. Well, syncopate, the root of it, the root words basically mean to cut, to break up, to cut, to chop into pieces something. So to syncopate something means to kind of throw off the rhythm, to cut and put a different emphasis somewhere else. In that regard, I wouldn't classify the Scottish snap as a syncopation because the Scottish snap, if you remember, it's a short strong and then it's a long week. But it's not changing the sense of where the beat is, and it's not interrupting where the beat is. So in that sense, I wouldn't call it syncopation, but on the other hand, it kind of could be classified as syncopation. But when I think of the Scottish snap, also because of my background, I tend to think of it in terms of Baroque ornamentation. We have this very common way of adding dissonance and expressive elements in the Baroque era in music, and we have fancy names for all these different ornaments, acciaccatura and appoggiatura and all those things. But the Scottish snap is similar to some of those ornaments, and so I would probably classify it in more of an ornamental, decorative, expressive category, and not so much a disruption of the underlying rhythmic placement. Interesting question. Thank you, Doug. And there are some other questions which are coming in right now. Michael Luneberg says, your analysis of that Metallica piece changed the way I heard it after listening for 30 years. Well, that's interesting. I'm so glad that something I said had some relevance to somebody somewhere, because it was a tough one for me. I'm glad you enjoyed it and had something to gain from it. Snooty Baronet says, how do you guys feel about the atonal avant-garde movement in classical music? Oh, that's a complicated question. I don't love that music. That brings me to something else which is going to come back in some of these other questions. I am perfectly okay not loving every kind of music. I'm perfectly okay strongly disliking some kinds of music, even within the classical realm. And this is something that is definitely in the classical realm, which I don't love, and most of it I strongly dislike. I can't bring to name any particular piece or composer right now, but I guess there are a few that I have heard which were really breathtaking in a way that I didn't expect. In general, that's not where my personal likings go. On the other hand, I do think it's a very important development that has value and merit, because if you look at every development along the way, there were always people who pushed the limits and maybe it sounded kind of not particularly appealing for a while, but eventually, once people begin to understand and get a better handle on this new style, then of course the more people are involved with it, the more it disseminates and disperses through things, then of course it gives yet one more artistic tool to utilize for very meaningful things, and it can be refined and polished and so forth. So I don't feel like it's bad or horrible. I don't love it, but at the same time, I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to go to something a little bit different now. Let's see here. Okay. Let's go to something that's kind of personal question, or well, it's not really personal, but I divided it from musical to non-musical. Okay, someone, silly program, says, do you take any sort of proactive measures to circumvent copyright issues for these? And the question is longer, but that's the main question, and having to do with YouTube's fair use and the fair use. I am very careful. As an artist, I appreciate and I value copyright laws. I'm very careful to not step outside of what I understand is appropriate use of copyright materials. Having said that, I've also done a bit of research on YouTube's copyright methods of control, And I have learned that it's really tricky. Of course, I understand why they have to do what they're doing, but that is one reason that from the beginning, I decided my format was going to be to comment and express myself in the moment rather than letting the piece play through, because I understand that that transformative, and whether someone's use of copyrighted material is transformative, transforms it into something else rather than the original, is better. So yes, I am taking certain measures, and at the same time I am respecting the copyright laws, and I feel very confident that what I'm doing is within bounds. I also understand YouTube might disagree with me. But anyway, all right. Let's see. What else have I got here? Well, I saved some special comments, not really questions, but some comments that just made us smile. I wish I could put on an Australian accent right now, because this comes from Felix Hood or Hude, and he says, Vlad, Australia calling, mate. It behooves me to tell you that after watching Amy react to She's Leaving Home, I fell head over heels in love, and it was my intention to travel to America in order to plight my troth forthwith. However, sadly, I see I'm too late. So, chapeau to you, mate, good choice and lucky guy. I shall now retire from the scene, sadder but wiser, but do remain a faithful subscriber. Progredimur. I don't know what that word means. And then, any chance of Amy reacting to all of Sgt. Pepper's. Anyway, cute comment. We both got a big smile out of it. Hi, Felix. You brightened our day with that comment. And, okay, back to some other questions. Somebody says, is it possible for you to expand and create another channel that you explore movie scores? Well, that gets into what our plans with this channel are. As you know, I started it just as a funny little side project. It's growing bigger than I expected. I want to give it what it deserves, and I may expand to some other branches of modern music, perhaps some movie scores. I don't see myself starting another channel right now. This is enough for me to handle, but it's an interesting thought, and thank you for that. Let's see, what else do we have? Listening style. Oh, this is an interesting question. I guess these questions came a bit earlier in the process, but somebody by the name of Steve Shawley said, I'm appalled but not surprised. Oh, never mind. I need to start with this one. Axel Gutzler says, after 3 minutes into the video, I had to write this comment. Is this really the way you approach music, stopping twice after a couple bars, etc., etc.? And so there was quite a long writing about that. And they were saying they felt like it was disrespectful, etc. Would I do the same with a piece of Bach? And the answer is absolutely yes. My way of listening to this music, which you're seeing me do on screen, is kind of a quick study technique, which we classical musicians use a lot when we have to learn and assimilate something very rapidly. We don't always have hours and days and months and years to develop a piece. Sometimes we'll get a call and say, so-and-so such and such orchestra is missing, the harpist is out sick or has some emergency, and can you fill the spot tomorrow night or a week from tonight? And you're like, okay, what are the pieces? Or once I got a call saying our regular harpist was going to be able to do a Christmas concert. We have a whole hour of music, the harp, and she's unavailable. It's 3 weeks from today. And my answer is, well, send me the music in a hurry. Let me see. So you're going from ground zero to performance ready very rapidly, sometimes within a matter of hours. And this is the sort of technique that we use not only with our listening, but with our practicing and study of the piece. It's how we get through and produce something that is actually something that the audience will appreciate and enjoy without spending years and years on a particular piece, or months or whatever, on a particular piece of music. And so then this comment kind of follows up on that. Steve Shawley saying, I'm appalled but not surprised that some of the comments by those who watched your video were critical of the way you listened to the music the first time through. And he talks about his experience attending the Los Angeles Philharmonic and watching their rehearsals, and how he noticed and he sees that just at any point in the music, the conductor stops and says something, has to make a mark, and then adjust quickly. That's how we work. And so that's kind of a bit of my listening style and technique, and it's, yeah, I don't feel like it's disrespectful at all. In many ways, it is respectful because, from my perspective, because I am giving the music full attention in every possible detail as quickly as possible. Some other comments coming in. Le Crap Face. After hearing all these guitar solos, do you plan on adding a ripping harp solo to any standards you regularly play? Interesting thought. Well, we have something in classical music kind of like guitar solos. We call it cadenza. And I play some of those cadenzas in some of the pieces of music, and it is kind of like a place where you develop the music in your own way. You use whatever technical abilities you are best at, because everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and it is a rather showy, virtuosic moment. I have created some of my own cadenzas along the way. I have copied other cadenzas along the way. As far as a guitar solo style, well, I'd have to play something kind of rock style to fit that, but maybe I will sometime. Several people have said, will you do a cover song of one of these that you've listened to? And maybe I will at some point. And if I do, I promise I will share it with you. Don Davis. Are you using cue cards or off the top of your head when you come back in second video to explain the music you just watched? I sit down and take notes as I'm going through studying, listening. If I can find the sheet music, I'll look at the sheet music, whatever. And so I have some rough notes, rough ideas, just to help myself not freeze up in front of the camera. But, so I guess you could say I'm using cue cards, but that's my approach. Okay, let's go to some more musical questions. Someone says, named Riadoc, I find your analysis truly fascinating and wholly engrossing. You reveal ideas and themes that had escaped my notice, etc. I would be curious to know, however, apart from your regard from the technical proficiency of the vocalist and musicians, whether you think the piece rivals the artistic stature of more traditional pieces of classical music. Is it art with a capital A, in the same sense that a piece by Mozart or Chopin is? I love the question. I don't feel like I am thoroughly familiar enough with this new music to make a valid judgment on that. Because that also brings up the question of what is art with a capital A. I do know that that's kind of what started my whole thought process on the video, Will We Ever Meet the Next Bach? Because many of the times, the things that we consider art with a capital A are things that have endured for generations and centuries. Some of this music has now endured for generations, although I don't think we can say it's endured for centuries yet, much of it. So a lot remains to be seen. But that doesn't mean that we can't evaluate and make our own judgments. I just don't feel like I'm qualified to make that judgment yet. Somebody else says, okay, Pedro Machedo? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. What's the difference between cadenza and cadence? Fabulous question. A little bit of a technical answer. But a cadence is the series of chords that bring us to the end of a phrase, or the strongest cadence is the end of a piece of music. Now, a cadenza is a point within that series of chords where the music stops on one of those chords, not the very last one, but one kind of moving towards the last one. The music stops, and then that chord is the launching point for an improvisatory moment. So it is very closely intertwined, but you could say a cadenza is a highly embellished, highly developed moment within a cadence. Russell Faraday says, do you improvise or jam with the harp, or is it all written dots and stuff? I do both. And I do less jamming, I do more improvising, and even more dots and stuff. The reason I do less jamming is because, at least in the past couple of years, it's been difficult to get together with groups of harpists and other musicians. So the opportunity to just really get in and have fun has not been so available. And it's slowly coming back to life, but slowly. Improvising all the time. And that brings up the question of what is improvising? Well, I could say that improvising is adding your own additions or adjustments to the music. We could take that a long ways out there, but just for the conversation today, sometimes I'll just have a chord chart, and somebody else is going to be taking care of the melody, somebody else is whatever, and my job is to fill in the harmonic elements, and I create my own accompaniment. That is a form of improvising. As far as improvising completely cold, I do it when I'm in the mood for it, in my own home here. I've never done it on stage. Old Man Jim H. Have you tried distortion pedals for harp? I haven't personally. I know a harpist. His name is Ben Creighton Griffiths, and he's from Wales, and he is a quite well-known jazz harpist. And he has an electric harp, which has all sorts of stuff connected to it. Probably some distortion pedals, amplifiers, all kinds of things. I've heard him play, and I found it fascinating and interesting. I've never gotten into that myself. What instruments do you enjoy accompanying on the harp in a duet situation? Well, I love chamber music. Small groups of musicians. Orchestral music, it's okay. Solo music, lots of fun. Chamber music is a happy meeting point of both of those. You're not just left to follow the conductor and the conductor's interpretation, because it's a small enough group that every musician has something to contribute to how the interpretation is going to develop. And it allows for some really wonderful group dynamics that are really enjoyable. And it also adds some variety to the tonal colors and sounds that the harp can produce, which are quite varied, but still, if you get a violin in there, if you get an oboe or a cello, I've done some harp with classical guitar. I've done harp ensembles with anywhere from one other harpist to 25 other harpists. That's a harp orchestra. I've accompanied a singer, and lots of different things. I can't say that I have a favorite, but I tend to like, because the harp, like the piano, like the drums, like the harpsichord, does not sustain a note for a very long time. As soon as you pluck it, the sound begins its process of decay. So I tend to enjoy an instrument which has the sustainability. Oboe, cello, violin, organ, something that adds a different layer of sound quality to it. Harp and guitar, it was okay, but it wasn't my favorite pairing as far as sound balance goes. Let's see. All right. Let's see what else I have here. Another question. This discussion makes me wonder how many classical pieces... Oh, this is by Steve H. Sorry, I forgot to name the name. How many classical pieces you may have heard and did not realize that the original composition was actually a rock and roll band. For instance, many Beatles songs have been converted to classical music, but there are many more. So during this journey, I hope you will let us know if you will stumble upon a song that you only knew as a classical piece prior to hearing the original rock version. That's an interesting concept. And I guess I would say that I don't think I've heard very many that I'm unaware of, because one of the things that we do is when we study a piece, we sit down and research its history. So I would assume that if I learned a piece of music which was based on some other melody or some other composition that was rock or jazz or something like that, I would assume that in the process of my research, I would learn about it. Now, it's possible that I've heard something which I didn't actually play and study so deeply, which had some influence which I wasn't aware of. So, John Vasey, camera stand fund? Thank you. I guess we need something. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see what else have we got here. Okay, let's go to another question here. I'm hoping this hasn't been asked already. This is by Carlos Nightman. If so, I apologize for the duplication. With your background in classical music, do you listen to any 20th and 21st century film and TV composers? I suspect that it is film and TV scores which provide the vast majority of people today with classical or orchestra-based music. Of course I have heard, but I'm not a big film score listener fan. Not because I dislike it. I guess probably because I just haven't ever really gotten into it. There's so much for me to listen to and keep up with and explore that I don't necessarily just go to listen for easy listening a lot. And I don't want to say that in a denigrating. I mean, easy listening is bad, and I don't mean that all film scores are easy listening. But I guess most of my exposure to film scores happens when I'm actually watching a movie, watching a film. If yes, which composers do I enjoy? Well, there are some really fabulous film score composers which are highly regarded even in the classical world. But I can't say, again, that I am enough of an aficionado to say that so-and-so is better than so-and-so, or that I like this person better than that person. But you gave me a recommendation, and I will check it out. So thank you. Got some more questions here. Funny Stursty. Do you speak German? Your pronunciation of Bach is flawless. I don't speak German. I know a few German words, and as some of the viewers already know because you watched my 10,000 subscribers celebration video, I did have exposure to, in my teens, some of my closest friends and neighbors were speakers of Pennsylvania Dutch. They were Amish and Mennonites. And so it's a German dialect. And I suppose I have picked up some of that linguistic cadence along the way just because I grew up with it. Samari Brady, how many instruments have you had over the years? Oh, I don't know. I'd have to count. I've been through at least half a dozen harps. And I have a forest of harps in my studio, mostly smaller ones for students. I start students at the delicate age of 4 years old playing the harp, and I work with them all the way through until they graduate high school and go off to college. And that is something that I love, not only with the harp but with the piano. So I have lots of instruments, but I'd have to go do an inventory count and see how many I've got. I have a Chinese flute, something that my great-grandfather gave me. They had spent some time in Taiwan and brought back this bamboo flute. It's about this long, this big around. I don't know how to play it, but it's a special little, keepsake that I have. And I have, let's see, do I have anything else? It's mostly harps and piano. Pedro Macedo, what's your favorite period of classical music? Oof, that's a tough one. It depends on my mood. How do I feel? What do I want to hear? I do have to say that I enjoy everything all the way from Renaissance music, medieval music, all the way through Baroque, Rococo, classical, romantic, French Impressionist, and some of the 20th century stuff as well. But that doesn't mean that I like all of it. It's more like different things appeal to me, and those are the things I like, and I push myself to go try out other things just because it's good for me, and sometimes I'm surprised and I fall in love with something new. Okay, so what else do we have here? Some more musical questions. I find your videos I enjoy your videos very much, although I find it intriguing that you, a musician, appear to give as much importance to the lyrics as you do to the music. To me, lyrics have always been incidental, a complement to the music, never the other way. That's a comment by Marielle Blues. And I guess I would answer, well, of course I'm a musician, and music is my thing. But whenever there are lyrics involved, we musicians want to pay close attention because we want the music to enhance the lyrics and for the two to create this symbiosis where one can't live as well without the other. And so I am in the habit of paying attention to lyrics and musical texts whenever they exist. Of course, in some classical music, you might just have one word or one phrase repeated over and over and over, and the idea is that the music is exploring all the ideas within that phrase. It depends, but yes, we do give attention to lyrics, even though we're not necessarily all lyric writers, poets, whatever. But it comes into play, definitely. Micah Vandam. Hi Amy, are you getting accustomed to the rock aesthetics, or do loud drums and distorted guitars still sound industrial, cold, and unpleasant to you? I am sure there are many rock songs out there with loud drums, distorted guitars, and industrial, cold, unpleasant sounds, which I haven't yet encountered, and which are going to be a challenge to me, I guess. But that brings up an interesting question. I was thinking about this just the other day and telling Vlad about it. It's not that I just like all soft sounds. We classical musicians have our own set of big, strong power sounds. If you've ever been to an organ concert, it shakes you to your core, and you wonder if you're going to have any eardrums left sometimes. It's like all creation is thundering down upon you at times. And it's really quite an experience. I guess maybe that's the same type of experience that people look for in a rock concert in a way. So that's one. And then somebody else asked, I have the question and I'll come to it, but I'm going to mention it now. Am I beginning to like ugly sounds? It was in reference to my comment on the Rammstein video where I said I liked that deep bass distorted sound. And again, I guess I would say there are certain sounds that naturally pull me. Of course, it has to do with exposure during childhood, what sounds we like. It also has to do with what our personality probably and other influences in our life. So there are sounds which I am innately attracted to and which I love. But at the same time, there are sounds which I wouldn't want to do without. And distorted guitar, I'm finding that it can be very expressive and fits so well in certain places. And I did enjoy that grittiness and that distortion there in that moment. That doesn't mean I'm in love with the sound with everything. It's true also of classical sounds. I remember as a child hearing harpsichord music. And to me it just sounded like, I don't know, gravel and sandpaper and dry toast or something, you know? If you just hear a harpsichord by itself, it had no appeal to me. Over the years, I began to realize that maybe it's not my favorite sound on its own, but when you put it in the context with other instruments, you can't live without it. It belongs and it adds something so important and unique. So I don't, I guess I wouldn't say that I find myself liking cold, industrial, unpleasant sounds, but at the same time, I see that in rock music it's not all that sound, and it's not always sounding like that in a larger context. So my experience is going to keep developing as my exposure continues, but that's a little bit of how I feel about it at this point. Matt Hill says, how have you not heard rock or pop songs in movies or in stores and restaurants? I'm glad you explained about the Pennsylvania Dutch connection. Well, I'm sure that I've heard music, rock songs in stores and restaurants and stuff, but when you're in a store, you're not paying attention to what's on the speakers very much. At least I'm not. I'm there to get my groceries and whatever. And I always felt like the music coming out of those horrid speakers was really irritating, because if I want to hear music, I want to hear it beautifully. Or at least with good sound, and a store just, so I always ignored it. That doesn't mean that I haven't heard something somewhere along the way, maybe without recognizing it, but and same in movies, right? Maybe I've heard something in the movies, but I didn't treat it, I didn't relate to it as a song, a piece of music that I should know or identify. So yeah, I've heard something somewhere probably. Do I know what it is? No clue. A2ZME. One day I hope you suggest to all your rock fans some classical pieces they might enjoy. Well, one of the things I've been doing, I've been listening to this new music. If you might have noticed, I usually include a link or two to some piece, maybe classical, maybe folk, maybe something that I find some connection to with that other rock song. And I guess I will continue doing that, because I love finding connections between genre styles and things like that. I think it's so nice to see what's like what contrasts with what they have in common and how are they different. And that's one of the ways. So keep your eyes out for those links. I hope you'll find some gems in them along the way. And maybe along the way, I'll probably just randomly at some point probably say, you guys need to go listen to this and tell me what you think. We'll see. Nick Face says, do you think chamber music will become popular again to the point where people are hosting concerts in their homes? Well, I don't know. The world we live in today is so different. I have been in home concerts, house concerts, and chamber stuff, but of course that's because of the connections I have in the world I live in, which is not the everyday modern world, non-musical world that a lot of people live in. I wish that every child could experience a school choir and a school orchestra as they're growing up. I wish that every child could have an appreciation and enjoyment of music, whether or not they become a musician. I wish that, because I think it would enrich everybody's lives so much, but obviously that's not the world we have right now. So I'm just trying to do my small part in encouraging musical literacy, musical enjoyment, because I feel like music is for everybody. And whether it is some, traditional Western art music like I come from, or rock music, or pop, or just folk music, whether it's strumming a banjo and singing something, or whatever, I feel like everybody should have the ability to experience and express and be enriched through music. And so I just try to do my small part in making that possible in any way I can. You can talk here about Gold's dream of having classical music in every home. Yeah, Glenn, actually that was, Vlad's like, I told you to. Vlad is a fan of Glenn Gould. And Glenn Gould is fabulous. I guess I have to say I love his music and his ideas too. But it's a dream that I think probably most of us musicians have, that every home could have music in it. But it's kind of a far out dream, but music and treats it is meaningful, it will be not always played, maybe listened to, but at least enjoyed. Wagner Corange. To learn theory, starting with one chord, A for instance, understanding its notes and scale, etc., then moving to a B chord scale. Can it work? Thank you, this is a great channel. Well, you will certainly learn things about theory that way. That doesn't mean that you will learn how all of it relates together. And again, I'm not sure if I'm fully qualified to answer this question, because I don't feel like I fully understand the theory behind rock music. And obviously, if you look at some other ethnic music, like let's say Indian music or whatever, I have very little understanding of the theory and the workings of it. But my understanding of what theory means is that you're learning the materials and how they interact one with the other in order to create music. So definitely you could do that. There might be some more efficient ways of doing it, but that will certainly help you if you're wanting to understand more about what you're dealing with in music. Paul Pinheiro. One thing intrigues me. You never heard any interpretation of Yesterday or Something? Both Beatles songs are widely covered. Yesterday? Have I heard Yesterday? I don't know. I don't know if I've heard Something. My biggest exposure to Beatles is through the King's Singers. If they've sung it, I've probably heard it. A very popular one that they've done, and another commenter said somewhere along the way that their choir teacher introduced their school choir back when he was in high school to the Beatles via the King's Singers cover of Blackbird. I have heard the King's Singers cover of Blackbird, and I think it's beautiful. Probably any classical musician would. But that doesn't mean that I've heard the Beatles. And that's one of my goals right now, is to hear the original creators and understand how that is. It gives a more, it builds out the whole picture better. So I don't know if I've heard Yesterday or something. Possibly, but I don't know. Old Man Jim H says, do you require students to be able to read music? I teach all my students to read music. I work with some disabled students who have reading or processing disabilities. And I am always trying to strengths and create a custom course for them, which meets them, builds up their strengths, and lets them shine, at the same time making them as versatile as possible. Most of my students, I guess I would say 99% of my students, learn to read at least some. It's not that hard to do, really. And it's so liberating. But if somebody has processing difficulties or visual difficulties, I'll adapt and I'll find ways for them to at least be functional so that they can continue. But I'm not going to cripple them and say, well, you can't progress beyond this unless you learn to read X, Y, and Z. That's my personal teaching approach. Michael Walsh, are you familiar with the harp music of 17th century blind harpist Caroline? Yes, I am. Interesting example of a folk music form being influenced by the Baroque. Absolutely. And he's a legend among harpists. And, from so many different angles. But there's this little tune called Caroline's Concerto, which I teach to my young harp students when they reach that certain level. So everyone who passes through my studio gets to learn about Caroline and study and learn the influences and stuff like that. Yes. Okay, so let's see here. What else do I have saved up? Oh, there's one that I want to get to. I have so many, I won't get to them all. There's one that I want to get to today. So let me see if I can find it. Where did it go? Ah, yes. This was a recent conversation just in the past couple of days on... And it started with a question by White Duke saying, "Hi Amy, what was your first vinyl?" And then somebody replied, Victor Alexander replied and says, $10 on She Doesn't Know What You Mean by Vinyl. And so I replied, I said, you lost your money. I'll tell you Saturday. And then Victor comes back and says, $10 on Brandenburg concertos. And I said, you lost this one too. Stop before you lose all your pocket change. And so I want to make sure you get this one today because it's a story you probably will all enjoy. First of all, I have to qualify this by saying I don't remember exactly what my first vinyl was. Well, I'm kind of outside of the age of just a little bit too young to have a whole collection of vinyls because by the time I was 7 or 8, my dad brought home a CD player and then we started collecting CDs. And we had a stack of vinyls at home. But by the time I was old enough to have pocket money to spend on my own recordings, I was buying CDs rather than vinyls. I do have some vinyls now. But I'm going to kind of rephrase this question and say, well, first of all, I know what a vinyl is. Although we called them, in our home, we called them records. I've heard other people call them LPs. But yeah. So I remember very young, we had this stereo system on a table in our home, and I there were certain vinyls which were played on the turntable, which I loved because there were certain sounds that appealed to me. And I remember being very small, and we kids weren't supposed to touch this piece of equipment. That's what our parents would put music on, and they didn't want us scratching the records or anything like that. So they were supposed to handle the needle and everything. Anyway, but I remember sometimes this particular record would be put on and playing, and there were certain tracks on it which had a sound that I loved. And I didn't know much about it, but I knew it was called harp. And it was mixed in with other sounds, because it turns out that this vinyl was actually a Christmas album by the Vienna Choir Boys. And it had a couple baritone singers. Placido Domingo and Herman Prey were guest singers, and then it had orchestra. So there were lots of sounds happening. But I remember there was a set of tracks which had harp in it, along with all the other musical sounds coming out. And I wanted to hear the harp, but it was hard to hear because it was mixed in behind. And harp is not a really pointed sound. It doesn't just come pouring out of the speakers when there are French horns and voices and things. So it was kind of mixed in the background. And so what I would do, I thought that if I turned the volume down just low enough so I could put my ear against the speaker, maybe I could hear the harp more clearly. And so I remember as a small child sneaking over there, turning the volume down to where I could stand to have my ear against the speaker and trying to pick out every note of the harp. I guess I would qualify that as my first vinyl musically. There was also another mini one, which was a story about a runaway elephant, which both myself and my siblings adored. And I think we wore it out. But then later, CDs came along, and I have quite a library of CDs, and of course now downloads, MP3s, whatever. But I think that's what I would count as my first vinyl, even though I didn't personally own it myself. I have a stack of vinyls now, which I've collected through the years. Some have been gifted to me, some whatever. And I don't currently have a turntable to play them with. I plan to at some point, but I have to get a little bigger living space first before I can start adding in things like that. Okay, let's see here. What else do I have? Hi Amy, have you ever listened to any old school blues? This is by Matthew Allen. I am passingly familiar with blues. I'm also somewhat familiar with jazz. Because those forms and styles developed earlier than rock. And so they were part of my study of classical music and the things that influenced classical music. I am no expert by any means. And I guess I'll be branching out more into that too at some point, just to keep expanding my exposure and so forth. But yes, somewhat familiar with the old school blues style. Jeremy Picard says, I'm wondering if you're doing all the edits and filming by yourself or is someone helping? I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for Vlad, who's sitting right over here, making sure the cameras and all keep going. And he does all the editing for me. He does all the setup, and I couldn't handle this if it weren't for him taking over all of that project. So no, I don't do any editing. That's not me. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. Old Man Jim says, I think you may overestimate modern accessibility to music. It is more available and can be downloaded, etc. I'm not going to read the whole comment, but a lot of the poor don't have easy access and don't have a cultural family to support endeavors or finances to buy instruments. If all the arts were a school requirement and the teachers were all there to inspire rather than to test, our society would be very different too. Also, would Bach be as popular if his work had been copyrighted? Did other artists plagiarize the music because it was easier than to be authentic? Etc. I loved that comment, and I loved the questions you posed. You are right. Music is not accessible as it should be. And a little earlier, I don't see it as something changing immediately that is going to happen in the near future. But I do, all of us, myself included, have a role to play in making it accessible. And again, this brings me back to what I do when I'm not sitting in front of a camera doing first lessons. And most of that is teaching. And most of it is teaching students in rural areas, remote areas, either online or in person. My studio is in a kind of a rural farming community where there's no other cultural outlets within miles and miles. And so it is kind of in a desert, in a cultural desert, musical desert, artistic desert. And I pour a lot of my time and energy into giving these children an exposure to something that I firmly believe will be a huge benefit to them their entire life. As far as making it accessible, I work with a lot of low-income students, and I always have several on school because they don't have, and I know so many others who do the same all across the country, because we teachers do feel very strongly and passionately that music should be accessible. But we're a small portion of the educational system, and there are huge gaps in it as far as artistic and cultural availability for everyone, and that is a big problem. But we do what we can, we do our best, and we are extremely grateful for those of you who encourage us, cheer us on, support us, and support the students who are trying to gain access to these things. Would Bach be as popular if his work had been copyrighted? That's an interesting question. Copyright ideas have developed through the centuries, through the years. I wouldn't say that other artists plagiarized the music because it was easier than to be authentic. Bach himself borrowed and copied prodigiously. And it was not considered plagiarism. And I don't consider it plagiarism because it was an artistic reframing and development of something that already existed. Every artist stands on the shoulders of those who came before. And of course we have conventions which have developed, especially in the 20th century, about crediting sources and things like that, which didn't exist prior. But I'm reluctant to accuse anyone of plagiarizing Bach or anything else in an artistic usage form, because a reuse can be just as original, perhaps even more original, than something created out of a vacuum. Let's see what else we have here. Let's go back to the musical questions. Someone says, is your focus going to be primarily rock, or will you explore other styles on your channel? Thinking of artists such as Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan. That was David Alexander Watts who asked that question. And I guess there was another question also saying, you've hit some big names and some classics, and then you kind of went into B-side, B-level material. I plan to circle back around to the big one. I plan to branch out to explore some of the older ones, some of the newer ones, and I have some plans developing for a project built around history, the history of music, of 20th century and rock music, which I think you're all going to love, but I'm not quite ready to make it public yet. But it's in the cooker, so to speak. Alyssa Ramirez, thank you so much for your contribution. That's very special. And Hartler Taylor, how are your wrists feeling from all the harp playing? My wrists never hurt. I was fortunate to have a teacher who taught ergonomically appropriate technique, and I've never had a performance injury. And some of my specialties are in restorative movement therapies, and so I always try to make sure that my students as well. And one of the things I love to do is help musicians who suffer from performance injuries to recover, either modifying their technique or finding what the problem is somewhere in the whole system of playing. Oh, and that reminds me of someone else asking, I've got to find this because I want to make sure I give the name out. I guess it would be, oh dear, probably down here. I'm sorry I can't find the name. Someone said that they were asking, do I get calluses on my shoulder from the harp? No, I get calluses on my fingertips. Actually, the harp doesn't really rest on my shoulder. I hold it with my knees, I support it with my knees, and it has this sort of fine balance point where it's not resting heavy, it's also not falling away from me. So those are some of the questions. I see I still have so many to answer. I don't want to make this too long. I will be back next week, same time, hopefully without problems in the setup and all of that. Thank you, every one of you, for being here, for participating. And I'm going to bring Vlad over here to say a few things to wrap up.
Well, there are a few things that we would like you to know concerning the future. As we said over and over again, we would like this channel to be a room where all of us learn and explore things which are new, things which are beautiful, enriching. And so we would like to make diverse.
Yeah, we're planning to diversify what I'm doing a bit, because it started as just, the first lessons.
Yeah, the first lessons and the first reactions, but we want to do...
Which will continue.
Yeah, definitely. But we want to do more than that.
Yeah.
Because as we said, we didn't expect this turnout so fast. But we really enjoy this community. And that's why we would like to expand and make the content diverse, be more diverse.
And we want it to be all content that is meaningful, beneficial, enjoyable, educational, and entertaining. Both sides of the coin. Because that's really the best way to learn, is to have fun doing it.
Right. And so the plan is to invite here in this channel other musicians as well, and we are already discussing with some musicians, and we want you to know that right now, actually, we had this idea. Some of you wrote like weeks ago, why don't you take Amy on a journey to explore rock music historically? And of course, I thought about this, and it was like, wow, how can this would be an amazing project to do. And we're planning to do it. That's the big news. We are planning to do it. We are very close to start doing this. But we're going to have together with us an expert, a musician, which is an expert in rock music history.
Yes.
And we're planning to start this journey and make a series of episodes step by step, going through all the history and how it developed and how rock music get to what we know rock music to be today.
So you'll get to going through this process of back in the early developments of the 20th century that eventually brought us to rock, and I'll be guided by this history expert and rock musician who seems to be a really fabulous encyclopedia of knowledge. I'm so excited about this, and you'll be able to watch my progress along the way.
Yes, and this is one direction that we want to go towards right now, to open a new direction. We have some other ideas that we're working on right now, but of course that means that we will have to spend more time, much more time, to develop this project, and that's okay because we love it. It's so beautiful.
And this has just kind of been a surprise journey all up till now. It started out, as I said, just a little side project, entertainment thing, but I see the potential, and I see that so many of you enjoy my journey, and I hope that you will be able to enjoy a journey along with me. And for that, I really want to invest the time and effort and resources to make it quality and have real substance. So I'm not wanting to go in the direction of just the OMG, that was beautiful reaction channels. Not at all. I want this to continue to be a sort of a lively, energized, and meaningful community experience.
Yes, because you see, of course, it's so easy to set up a camera and sit down and listen to a piece of music and say, oh, it makes me feel so good. Oh, this guitar, oh, this voice, and so on and so forth, and have no substance at all. Maybe there's a place for that too, but
sure there is.
Yeah, but
it's already filled.
And not only that,
it's not my interest.
We are not there. This is not our interest. Time is very precious for us because we want to explore, we want to learn, for once, and then secondly, Amy wants to give to everybody out there, to all of you, what she already has and what she already knows. So that's why we want to invest more time, more energy into developing this project. But of course, that means that we need to take time from other projects, and we will have to find ways to support financially this project. And we're thinking of different ways. Some of the ways which are out there don't really appeal to us for different reasons. Some which are ethical,
kind of gimmicky, or have to do with ethics concerns.
And that's why we didn't start doing this. We didn't go very hard towards that direction. But right now we have something in our mind, and I guess this is decent and it can work. As you already know, right now her experience with every new song is split in two. It's the first listen video, and then it's the second one, which is in-depth analysis. And of course, as we already told you, we shoot the first listen, and then she takes a few days to study the music score and to listen to the song over and over and over again, uninterrupted. Yes, uninterrupted.
I do uninterrupted.
Yes. And so what we were thinking is to have this first listen reaction video available for all of you out there beforehand, for all of you out there who want to support this channel via Ko-fi. So if you want to, that would be a way to support this channel if you want. I see that you're writing a lot. I will read afterwards. I'm not there
before we close
so
up.
This is a way by which you can support if you want. Go on Coffee on her account there, on her page, and if you will be a become a contributor there, you will get access to this
You have
first
the early access.
To the first video, the first listen.
Even before I've finished the in-depth analysis.
Exactly. And then there you will be able to leave comments with suggestions for her in-depth analysis, maybe links with more materials for her to study that maybe we don't find, anything that would be helpful,
or even thoughts or personal insights that you think the music gives to you, because I'm always open to discovering even more than I do on the first listen, right? So that's the whole point of this research process, is to see how much can be unpacked out of this music in the course of a few days. And so if there's something that you want to say about it yourself, I'll definitely take that into consideration as I'm digging into the music.
And so, as we said, we are planning to bring in here in this room, in this virtual room, of course, for everybody, for us and for you as well, some other musicians, which will be able to bring in their input and share their own experience and knowledge with all of us to dig in more deeply. Of course, our primary object is rock music. So we have a lot of plans. Now, as I'm looking to these questions that are here, she barely touched a few of them. Man, we have so many, because believe it or not, we took time to go through all of them. Well, I did this.
Yes.
I took screenshots. I selected them on categories, and then I presented them to her. She went through the questions and made the selection again to have everything organized to be able to present it to you in a meaningful way. And now I can see what we're here since almost 1.5 hours, and we barely touched a few of them. We're thinking of having this live session once a week, just like we are now, every Saturday morning at 11 o'clock our time. Maybe we should do it more often. I don't know. We have to think. Look,
we'll start with once a week and see how it goes.
We cannot commit though, because of course many things can happen, but this is our desire. And here's the thing. If you have any other ideas of how we should organize, even technically, please, Vlad, please share it with me, because I'm learning. I never did. The first time was the last time when we celebrated the 10K. I did my first live. It worked well. This time it was a mess. Again, my apologies for taking 15 minutes of your time. That was really bad. But I hope I will learn enough, fast enough to be able to go smoothly. And so please share with us all your suggestions, both technical suggestions or about this channel, about this show, about how to go with it in the future, because we are reading everything, we are pondering, we are brainstorming every idea, and because we want it to be the best way possible for all of us.
Yeah, definitely.
That's our desire. So thank you so very much for your presence with us today.
Thank you.
It was fun.
I enjoyed it.
I went through all your comments
You should go check before we shut it down,
Yeah,
just to see if there's anything important.
Oh, there's a whole stream of them. Let's say thank you to Brian F for his donation, $5.
Thank you, Brian F.
Yes, and there's a long stream of comments.
I'll sit down and read them afterwards.
We will sit down and read them. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
In probably, I hope, Monday, the Brothers in Arms experience will be online. Of course, we already shot the first listen. It was great. It was, from my perspective, one of the best. I can hardly wait for you to watch it and to let us know what you think about it. Hopefully by Monday we will have the second part, and then we can put up both of them for you. And we hope that in a week's time we will be able to meet again live. That would be really, really cool.
Yes, it would.
So again, thank you very much for being with us. It was good. Stay safe, and we keep in touch through messages, and hopefully we will see each other again in 1 week's time.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.